Club, Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this hearing. Thanks to all of the witnesses for being here. It's great to see a current Attorney General here on the panel as well. There are a couple of things that I wanted to focus on. The first is that while I don't support cancellation of all student debt for the reasons that have been talked about, the massive, I think, subsidy to wealthier Americans and also the massive subsidy to universities, I want to say I can't think of very many good reasons to keep students with massive amounts of debts as lifelong serfs of banks and lifelong serfs of universities by not allowing them to discharge in bankruptcy their debt under appropriate circumstances. And so I want to thank Senator Cornyn and Senator Durbin and others for their work on this and say I think that this is a very sensible approach. And I also want to say that I think that we need to focus on the role of the universities themselves. And attention's been drawn to the for-profit universities, rightly, in terms of concerns there. Thank you for your work on that, Attorney General. But let's not let the more traditional universities off the hook. And I want to come back to what the traditional four-year public and private universities have been doing. I mean, just look at the numbers here. The annual cost of, just over the last few decades rather, the annual cost of tuition, fees, room and board at public four-year universities has increased 543% from about $3,800 in 1985 to almost $21,000 in 2018. I mean, that's unbelievable. It's increased 483% for private four-year universities over the same time period. I mean, the only good in America, the only product, good or service in America, I believe that has outstripped education, higher education in terms of its cost, is healthcare, which is stunning. I mean, because we all know the deep dysfunctions there. So this is totally unsustainable. I want to come back to a point that I think it was Senator Whitehouse made, that research shows that higher levels of student loan debt can lead people to delaying marriage or to not getting married, not being able to purchase a home, not being able to start a family in terms of having kids or invest in a family if they do have kids. So it's just unbelievable. And I think that the role of the colleges and universities in perpetuating this and taking the money that has been allotted to students. I mean, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York did an analysis recently that showed for every new dollar that a college received in subsidized loans, they raised their tuition cost 60 cents. I mean, so talk about just capturing the money and pocketing it. It's unbelievable. So Dr. Akers, let me just ask you, because I know that you've looked at this. How do you think we should increase accountability on institutions that receive these student loans and are charging increasingly outrageous tuition while profiting and padding their endowments? What do you think that we can do about that?
Yeah, so to say first, if a college is really expensive, but it delivers huge dividends consistently in terms of great earnings opportunities, then good on them. My concern is that we don't have that consistent outcome. And I think that regulations should be looking at the return on investments that students are getting in order to determine eligibility for federal financial aid. The gainful employment regulations made that the case for for-profit and work training type programs. I'd like to see outcome-based accountability, meaning some measures of ROI, return on investment for the students, used rather than the current system of accreditation that we have in place today as the gatekeeper to federal funding.
Let me ask you about this. I've introduced legislation that would make participating higher education institutions liable for up to 50% of any student loan balance that goes into default and that has been used towards the cost of attendance at the institution. What do you think about that idea?
I'm a big fan of getting institutions to have skin in the game when it comes to the federal loan program. I think the concerns are the implications for equity. We know that economically disadvantaged students will be the first to lose access to enrollment opportunities as a result of that. So we need to be comfortable with that happening and potentially be willing to offset those losses with additional grants.
Well, I certainly wouldn't want to see any discrimination against lower income students or those from disadvantaged backgrounds. I mean, quite the reverse. But what I do want to see is these colleges and universities who charge outrageous amounts of tuition and do nothing currently to have any kind of accountability for it. And to me, it is absolutely indefensible for these universities to be getting endowments. Like, for instance, the University of Michigan has an endowment of $11.9 billion. $billion. Harvard, $38.3 billion. Yale, $29.3 billion. Stanford, $26.4 billion. Princeton, $25.9 billion. I mean, this is, and you look at the tuition that they charge to their students. Against 4 of those are private, 1 of them's public, and I could go on. I mean, it's unbelievable. Frankly, I think it's indefensible that these colleges are charging the kind of tuition that they're charging. They're taking the federal student loan money that they're taking. They're putting students on the hook, and then they're accountable for none of it. I mean, we've got to do something about this. I also think, and I'll end with this, Mr. Chairman, I also think it's important that we begin to allow federal loan money and maybe non-loan money, Pell Grants, for instance, to go to job training and certification programs. It shouldn't be that you have to go a traditional prescribed route to this particular college, to this particular program in order to access Pell Grants, for instance. We should allow folks to take those into job training, into other certification programs, to be able to break up this higher education monopoly. Thanks to all of the witnesses for being here. Thank you for your work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Hawley. Senator Lee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to